You're watching Morning at NTV.
Good morning. Welcome back to Morning at NTV. My name is Malaki Vilodera. So today we are having a sensitive conversation here on Kickstarter, and this is to do with the death penalty. Do you know where Uganda stands? Let's play this bite so you can get to know where we stand and what this means for us before we get into the discussion. Let's take a look.
Uganda as a country, we still have death penalty on our law books. 2, it's a constitutional matter. The parliament approved it. Of course, for us as corrections officer, we would dream of such a day where there would be no death penalty. Because you see, these people are like part of our family. We see them every day, we are with them. Even the process of exterminating life is not an easy one.
Exactly. And so on the 10th of October this year, immediately the day after Independence Day, now Uganda will be joining the entire world in commemorating the 16th World Day Against Death Penalty under the theme Living Conditions on Death Row. And in studios to talk about that, and of course this person is totally against this particular, style of capital punishment, and his name is Dr. Livingstone Sewanyana, who is the ED of the Foundation for Human Rights Initiative. Thank you so much for making time, sir.
Pleasure.
So the prison service spokesperson has clearly said it, and of course this is a few months ago. He said that the constitution in Uganda allows for death penalty. But of course, before we saw this happen, the last time we saw this happen was 10 years ago. But what he says is even them, they don't like it. Executing these people is not easy. So you have been against this particular capital punishment. Let us in on that, because many argue that if someone has been convicted of a crime for 28 times and is totally guilty, then he's beyond reprieve.
Yeah, of course, there are many arguments for and against the death penalty. But for us as campaigners against the death penalty, our strong belief is that it's not a deterrent. And there is no proof anywhere that if you practice the death penalty, you actually, forestall the commission of such crimes that attract the sentence. And increasingly, it is clear. Let's, for example, look at it this way. In 1999, we had an execution of 28 people on death row. But what is interesting is that a day after the execution, there were bombs that were thrown around Ndeba and other places. And we also know that there were bombs that were thrown around the rugby ground, you remember, during the World Cup?
Yes.
As well as the Ethiopian village. The key question then is, if it is a deterrent, how comes that commission of such crimes continue? So the problem must be elsewhere. But there have also been cases of miscarriage of justice. For example, we have the case of Edwin Mpaji, who was on death row for 18 years, only to find out later that actually the person he's purported to have killed was alive and sound. So how do you repair that? But one would also argue that campaigners against the death penalty, are they condoning crime? Because I think that's the big question that you're asking.
Exactly. And actually,
do we condone crime?
Yes.
I want to say we don't condone crime.
Okay.
In fact, we want crime to be punished in the severest and strongest way. And by the way, do you know what is the most severe form of punishment?
Tell us.
For those who commit such offenses, it is life imprisonment. And that has been shown. You see, if you talk about life imprisonment for those who are on death row, they'll tell you you are their worst enemy. Because one thing is clear. Death is for sure. Everyone will die. So you are doing the obvious. But if you say, I'm going to commit you to life imprisonment, you are alive forever, then you definitely are punishing this person in the most severe form.
Early this year, we saw the president coming out to say that it's been over a decade since the last executions were actually undertaken. And so he said that the crime rate in the country is increasing because now criminals are taking advantage of his leniency, and that he would go back to executing people, to executing the death penalty on criminals. So when you say that once we execute death penalties, it does not stop crime, then how else can crime be fought? Because people say that if you know the consequences of your actions and you know how dire these consequences are, then you'll keep off from that particular crime. So in terms of fighting crime and for criminals just to have that anger of reforming, what ideally would be the right direction to take?
First of all, I understand where the president is coming from. If you say an eye for an eye, it's very attractive to many people. But of course, we are beyond that time. The time for an eye is long gone. Today, we talk about forgiveness, we talk about reconciliation, and this is what even the New Testament provides for. Now, when someone says, oh, because the crime rate is increasing, I now need to resume the executions, I think he's being reactionary. And the whole idea of the death penalty is reaction. You are trying to react and reassure the population that you are in control. But actually, you are not being in control. If you really think of dealing with crime, the best approach is a preventive strategy. You invest in the administration of justice. You ensure that the law enforcement agencies are well facilitated, they are well trained, and they are capable of deterring crime. So you don't actually use the death penalty for purposes of dealing with a situation which is not within your power. And actually, when you talk about the death penalty, you are talking about a process whereby someone goes through, conviction, sentencing, a person is on death row for many years, and then the execution takes place. Now, the funny thing is, even the public is not aware of that process as such. Secondly, let's not confuse the two, the death penalty and extrajudicial killing. Extrajudicial killing is where, for example, the state is involved in that arbitrary killing. But here you're talking about a process. The question is, should the state also kill? Because the death penalty gives a license to the state to kill. And yet the primary responsibility of the state is to protect people and their property. So what are you really doing? Can one wrong correct another wrong? You definitely can't get that right that way. So you're better off engaging in processes that will actually reassure the population that indeed you are on top of things. And carrying out execution is not the best. So how do we reassure the population that, yes, it's possible to deal with these people? Let's get back to the root of the problem. Where is the root of the problem? For example, those who are killing, why are they killing? Sometimes those who kill are persons who have been discriminated against. Sometimes it's people who are being used by those who hold positions of responsibility. Sometimes they're state officials. We have seen killings going on in various parts of the country, and it is very clear that there are state security apparatus who have been involved. Now, those are people who are supposed to protect people and their property, and they're turning against them. So something has fundamentally gone wrong.
In Uganda, we know that by the time you are actually, merited to death penalty, then you have to have committed 28 offenses. That has been the law.
Now, there are 28 offenses that attract the death penalty.
That attract the death penalty, exactly.
Yeah.
So someone would argue that 1, 2, 3, 28. By the time it's 28, and of course, then the death penalty is not just for any crime, it's for specific crimes. So how ideally, over and above imprisonment, life imprisonment, because now we know that the prison service is undergoing reforms just to ensure that the rehabilitation of these prisoners is, catered for. So with regards to that, someone who has committed 28 crimes, and of course these are heinous crimes.
No, anyone who commits any of the 28 offenses, not necessarily that you have committed the 28 offenses. Now, let's get it this way. First of all, those 28 offenses, some of them are just absurd. the 28 offenses, 17 of them are under the UPDF Act.
Right.
And the other 11 are actually under common law, the criminal code. Now, the point is, there are some offenses which are laughable. For example, if you are a soldier and you're on the front line, and for one reason you express cowardice, you become a coward, that attracts a death sentence. Or treason, for example, as we know it. Just because you don't agree with the state, you can be, and you have seen many people being charged with treason, and that can also attract the death sentence. Those are very laughable, absurd. So, the international law has made provision for the death penalty only to be provided in the rarest of the rare cases. And what is rarest of the rare is actually what they call murder. And even in murder, there are certain, you can qualify murder. Because sometimes it could be out of circumstances which one can excuse. For example, we have women facing the death penalty who are on death row, mainly because they were provoked, and in the heat, they definitely either killed the husband or, and you can understand that they themselves have suffered injury, and in response to that, this has happened. Of course, we shouldn't be condoning at all those
or
sort
justifying.
of, yeah, justifying that. But the point is, the whole reason why this campaign is there, and the whole reason, for example, why 16 African states, for example, have abolished the death penalty, why 18 states in the United States have abolished the death penalty, why the entire European Union official policy is to ensure that no state that practices the death penalty is a member of the European Union, is mainly because increasingly they have realized that once not only the fact that it's not a deterrent, it's not civilized in any way, and the whole essence should be to reform and rehabilitate people and create situations that make people run away or avoid the commission of such heinous crimes.
Okay, let's take to the issue of reforming these particular prisoners. Do you, as a foundation, do you have confidence that the prison services here in Uganda have the right rehabilitative, kind of structures just to ensure that once these people come on board, then by the time they get out, if they're people who are, involved in crimes like stealing and stuff like that, then they're imparted with skills that once they're out there, if it's not, of course, on, life imprisonment, then they can go back to the society and add value. Do you feel like that is happening in terms of rehabilitating this particular prisoners?
Of course, you have just heard from Frank Baine, spokesperson of the Uganda prisons, that these people become part of them. And I've interfaced with them on several occasions. I have seen people who, of course, have been reformed. You find people who have even got saved, and they sing praises to the Lord. They definitely, when you look at them, you even wonder whether they ever committed this crime. And we have had cases of people who were on death row, who have fortunately been released, and they are living within the community, and apparently they are being very productive. And you wonder whether these are the people who actually, are supposed to have killed X, Y, Z.
Right.
The point is, it's possible to reform these people. There are cases of people who are so reformed. We also know people. I mean, Chris Rakasisi is one of those who was on death row. He's now a presidential advisor on security. I'm sure you know about that. And there are very many. The Edwin Impages, they are a resource. They are preaching good behavior. They are among communities. They are resourceful. So the point is, no one is beyond redemption. You cannot say so and so cannot be actually reformed. And there are cases of people who were on death row, who have been released, they are living purposefully in the community, and they are really reformed. So
you have confidence in the current structures of the prison
It is very
service.
possible. But of course, no situation is perfect. You can argue that if, for example, if that's the direction and there's investment in that direction, then it's possible that they could acquire even more skills, be more resourceful, and ideally serve as an example. I think what's the most important is that such people need to be given a chance to demonstrate to the people that, one, it's bad to commit such crime.
Right.
That, two, you could be more purposeful and more useful to community by doing better. And then you give a good example to the people that, yes, I think it's possible.
According to Amnesty International reports, what they're saying is many sub-Saharan countries are actually moving away from the death penalty kind of code. And so in 2016, we saw some of our neighboring countries in Africa, you know, like in Kenya, we saw the president, you know, giving pardon to them that were on death row. And in Nigeria, the opposite happened. Still in the same year, actually, the president, a total of 527, you know, were convicted, were actually executed, them that were on death penalty. This apparently in 2016 was the highest in Africa. Now, when it comes to raising concern, because after that, of course, people like you then in Nigeria came out to raise concerns because before that, before the execution, actually the courts found out that a total of 32 people were innocent. You know, they were innocent. So with regards to, and that of course shows that there are some loopholes in the justice system. So with regards to just ensuring, you know, the countries that will not embrace this, of course, we don't know if Uganda will change the whole scenario and abolish, you know, death penalty in totality. But with regards to just ensuring that them that are on death row are there rightfully and that there are no innocent people on death row, what should be done to tighten the strings of the judicial processes?
Of course, we need to ensure that, you know, all the way, the whole process is waterproof, that there are no possibilities of miscarriage, and that the whole appeal process has been exhausted. And that when someone is actually convicted and sentenced, he actually deserves it. I think that's important. But that has a lot to do with the whole process. You know, the legal process is a very burdensome and bureaucratic process. Along their way, there are shortcomings, quite a number. It can be an issue of the quality of representation. It can be an issue of quality of investigations. It can be an issue of evidence gathering. It can also be an issue of mistaken identity. So there are many things that can go wrong. But let's also not look at Uganda as if it is one country that hasn't made any progress at all in this area.
We've made a lot of progress,
and I want to just give a recount of the progress we have made, because we have been in this campaign for the last 20 years or so, and many things have happened. For example, as I told you earlier, a number of people who were on death row following the Susan Chigula case were actually had their cases commuted to life imprisonment, over 186 cases. There have been people who have been released who were on death row. I mentioned a couple of them, like Edwin Mpaji. I talked about Chris Rakasisi. So there has been, those were, for example, Chris Rakasisi received presidential pardon. Then in terms of progress, one can also cite the fact that Uganda now has abolished mandatory death sentences. Every offense that attracts mandatory death sentence actually is unconstitutional. So it requires to be repealed and struck off from our statute books. But let's also be mindful that following the Susan Chigula ruling, we have a private member's bill before Parliament, which has been subject to 2 public hearings. One during the 9th Parliament and during the 10th Parliament. The Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee received you know, views from the public and the state. We are waiting for a report to be presented on the floor of Parliament about their findings. So, and then I think 2 years ago, for the first time in history, Uganda abstained from voting on a resolution on stay of executions, or a moratorium on executions. Yet for a long time, Uganda used to vote against the resolution. So there has been some progress, one can say, and we need to build on that progress. It's unfortunate that we are now having calls for execution, and that really is not progressive. So we think that Uganda can make that firm step. By the way, interestingly, the Gambia is now the latest African state to join the fray. They have just ratified the second optional protocol, you know, on the ICCPR calling for abolition of the death penalty. So I want to say it's possible. If Rwanda did it, if Burundi did it, the Gambia is doing it, Cape Verde did it, why not Uganda? Uganda should be actually model, because it set the example, for example, for Kenya, for Tanzania, for Malawi, on the whole question of mandatory death sentences being unconstitutional.
Correct.
Yeah.
We have close to 300 people in Uganda who are on death row.
Right.
As a foundation, what are you doing to ensure that this is totally cancelled, or they may be commuted to life imprisonment as an option? What are the strides you're making in that regard?
Of course, this is an issue of political will. It also is an issue of public concern. I mean, the public also needs to come out very clearly. I'm happy that 2 years ago, when we commissioned the last opinion poll, 64% of the respondents, I'm talking about the respondents, right, said that they were against the death penalty. So the public needs to be heard, you know, on this very issue more loudly than they are now today. And of course, people need to be convinced that it just doesn't work. The death penalty doesn't work. The fact that you still have a high crime rate in this country, that murders are still taking place, and yet you still have the death penalty on the statute books, that should explain that it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't work. You need to invest in more civilized approaches, strengthen the judicial system, strengthen the investigative machinery, strengthen the law enforcement machinery, and ensure that you deter such crimes from being committed, and not use a reactionary approach as a way of saying, we're on top of things. Let's use a more appreciated and preventive strategy to deal with the problem.
You have been interfacing with the families of some of the people who were executed a few years ago. What are these effects, dire effects that, you know, death penalties have on families of them that were executed?
Actually, it has a very devastating effect. One of the groups that deals with this issue is Wells of Hope. Wells of Hope, they take care of, they take care of children of those who are on death row. We have had testimonies from them, and actually on 10th this October, they'll also be giving further testimonies. The children are actually, you know, devastated. They have no one to look to. They are actually equally condemned to death when actually they were not party to the whole ball game. So it has a devastating effect. Especially if someone is wrongly convicted and sentenced to death. Definitely, the children have no one to look to. But of course, I have had so many arguments. Why do you really talk about those families of those who have committed such crime? Why not talk about the victims? Right. Yeah, I'm also very much concerned about the victims and their families, because definitely they suffer a serious blow. So that is why I'm saying there is no win-win in this case. There is no win-win. The families of those who are convicted and sentenced to death are devastated. Those families of the victims are also devastated. So where should we put more attention? Let's direct our efforts in ensuring that these crimes do not occur, and reinforce those institutions which must ensure that this doesn't happen. If it happens because maybe there's no system which is waterproof or foolproof, let's make sure that we have reduced it to the basic minimum, and as international law does provide, reduce it to the rarest of the rare.
Okay. All right. You're supposed to actually go today to visit those condemned to death penalty in Luzira today, but apparently that will not be possible. What has happened? Of course, you've tried to touch base with Mr. Frank Baine, who is the prison service spokesperson, to get to know why your meeting, your visit has actually been, is it cancelled or postponed? But of course, that's a developing story, and we'll keep you posted on that. Mr. David, Mr. Livingston, thank you so much for coming in studios. We are totally grateful for shedding light in that topic. Of course, we are watching this space. Let's see what the government does if this death penalty is actually abolished or it stays, or if them that are, of course, you've said that close to 300 people are on the death row. What will the government do? Will they commute them to life imprisonment instead? That has been the discussion on Kickstarter segment. Keep your views coming. The hashtag is morning@NTV. That's on Twitter. You can also stream us live and drop in your comments. NTV Uganda, that's on Facebook and YouTube pages. Keep it here. Morning@NTV still continues.